The moment didn't look dramatic at first. It came during a routine appearance, the kind designed to promote work rather than stir headlines. A question was asked, an answer began, and then a detail slipped out that didn't belong in the script. By the time anyone realized what had happened, it was already too late to pull back. What made it unsettling was how casual it sounded. Jamie Dornan wasn't making a confession, and Dakota Johnson wasn't staging a reveal. It was a sentence that landed sideways, carrying more weight than intended. The kind of line that forces everyone listening to reconsider what they thought they already knew. At first, fans weren't even sure they'd heard it correctly. Clips were replayed, slowed down, dissected. The phrasing was careful, but unmistakable. There was something Jamie had kept private, and Dakota had known about it all along. Not a rumor she heard later. Something she had been aware of from the beginning. The reaction online was immediate and confused. This didn't fit the familiar narratives fans were used to debating. There was no romance implied, no betrayal hinted at, no scandal neatly packaged for outrage. Instead, there was a sense of discomfort, as if a curtain had been lifted on a version of Jamie that didn't match the public image people had grown comfortable with. What fueled the shock wasn't the existence of a secret, but the idea that it had been shared selectively. Dakota wasn't describing gossip that spread naturally. She was referencing trust, the kind that's granted quietly, without witnesses, and maintained over time without explanation. As commentators rushed to speculate, those closer to the industry urged caution. This wasn't a story that benefited from exaggeration. The secret, whatever its nature, had been protected for a reason. And that reason, insiders suggested, had more to do with timing than wrongdoing. Fans began to revisit old interviews with fresh eyes. Answers that once sounded vague now felt deliberate. Moments where questions were deflected seemed less accidental. The pattern emerging wasn't one of deception, but of control, choosing what the public was allowed to see, and when. What stood out most was how long the silence had lasted. Years had passed with countless opportunities for clarification, yet nothing had been said. That kind of restraint doesn't happen without agreement. Dakota hadn't kept the secret because she was asked publicly. She kept it because she understood what revealing it too early might cost. The shock deepened when people realized the secret wasn't about the past they thought they knew. It wasn't tied to a specific event fans could point to. It was broader, more personal, and harder to categorize. That ambiguity made it more unsettling than any concrete revelation could have been. Within hours, headlines tried to simplify the story. But simplification only made it feel wrong. This wasn't a secret designed to provoke. It was one that had been carried quietly, out of consideration rather than fear. And that distinction mattered. Those close to Jamie described the leak not as exposure, but as inevitability. Time changes the weight of truth. What once felt fragile eventually becomes survivable. The problem wasn't that the secret existed. It was that fans had assumed they already knew everything there was to know. Dakota's role in the moment added another layer. She didn't speak with urgency or relief. There was no sense of unburdening. Instead, her tone suggested acceptance. As if acknowledging the secret was less about revealing it, and more about recognizing that it no longer needed protection. That subtlety was lost on many viewers at first. Shock dominated the conversation. But beneath the noise, a quieter realization began to take shape. This wasn't a betrayal of trust between Jamie and Dakota. It was proof that trust had existed all along. The most unsettling thought for fans wasn't what the secret was. It was the idea that their understanding of Jamie had always been incomplete. Not wrong, but curated. Carefully, intentionally, and with the help of someone who knew when silence was kinder than honesty. By the end of the day, one thing was clear. Whatever had finally come out wasn't meant to shock for entertainment. It shocked because it reminded people of something they often forget. Public figures aren't public property. And some truths don't come out until they're strong enough to stand on their own. What fans struggled to accept wasn't that a secret existed. It was that the secret didn't look like anything they had imagined. There was no explosive revelation. No scandal hiding in plain sight. Instead, the truth sat in a quiet space between identity and expectation. According to people familiar with the situation, the secret Jamie Dornan had kept wasn't about a relationship or a single event. It was about a period of self-doubt that never fit the confident image audiences embraced. A time when certainty hadn't arrived yet, and strength was something he was still learning how to perform. That's where Dakota Johnson came in. She wasn't a co-conspirator or a gatekeeper. She was simply present at the right moment, aware of a side of Jamie that wasn't ready to be seen. The secret existed because someone had witnessed vulnerability before it could be safely contextualized. For years, that knowledge stayed between them without ceremony. No pact, no dramatic promise, just an understanding that some truths need time. Dakota didn't keep silent because she was asked to protect an image. She stayed quiet because revealing the truth too early would have frozen Jamie in a version of himself that no longer existed. When fans say they were shocked, what they really mean is that their assumptions were disrupted. The secret didn't confirm fantasies or fuel outrage. It complicated the story. It suggested that growth had happened behind the scenes, uncredited and unseen. That complexity is uncomfortable. Audiences prefer clean arcs and clear labels. The idea that someone could become who they are because of something they hid, not because they deceived, but because they needed space, doesn't translate easily into headlines. The reason the secret finally surfaced wasn't pressure or guilt. It was distance. Time had done its work. The fragile version of Jamie had been replaced by someone steady enough to acknowledge that fragility without being defined by it. At that point, the secret stopped being a liability and became context. Dakota's role in its emergence was almost incidental. A comment here, a clarification there. Nothing that would have mattered years ago suddenly made sense now. The shock came not from the content, but from the timing aligning at last. Those close to Jamie say he wasn't surprised by the reaction. He knew fans would project expectations onto whatever was revealed. What he didn't anticipate was how quickly people would try to reduce the truth to something more sensational than it was. In reality, the secret didn't rewrite his story. It filled in the margins. It explained why certain questions were avoided, why some moments felt rehearsed, why control mattered. It didn't make him less admirable. It made his journey more precise. The fan response evolved as the initial shock faded. Conversations shifted from speculation to reflection. People began to recognize that the version of Jamie they loved wasn't contradicted by the truth. It was built on it. And that realization changed the tone. What began as disbelief softened into understanding. The secret hadn't been kept to manipulate perception. It had been kept to allow transformation without interference. The most telling detail was what didn't follow. No rebuttals. No clarifications, no attempts to reshape the narrative. The truth stood on its own, unembellished and unprotected, because it no longer needed shelter. In the end, the shock wasn't about discovering something new. It was about realizing how much had been assumed. Fans weren't reacting to a secret being revealed. They were reacting to the limits of what they thought they knew. Some truths don't shatter an image. They complete it. And once that happens, the secret stops being a secret at all.